There is something many people believe about time, that we simply don't have enough of it. Not enough hours in a day. Not enough time to get everything done. Not enough time to keep up with life. So we try to do more. Wake up earlier. Work faster. Fill every empty space in the schedule. Every minute has to be useful. Every hour has to be productive. But no matter how hard we try, the familiar feeling always returns. Exhaustion, the sense that we are always falling behind others. The feeling that there is always something left unfinished. At the end of the day, many people still lie down with the same thought. I didn't do enough today, and over time, that feeling quietly becomes a normal part of life. But there is a question. Very few people stop to ask, what if the problem isn't a lack of time? What if the real problem is the way we look at time? The modern world has planted a belief in our minds that time is something to control, something to optimize, something to conquer. And that very belief quietly drains our energy. It exhausts our creativity. It turns every day into a race. And while we run faster and faster, the most important years of our lives quietly pass by, but long before packed schedules and productivity apps existed. Another culture looked at time in a very different way. In Japan, more than 1,000 years ago, people had already begun to reflect deeply on how human beings live within time. They didn't try to do less. They didn't try to move slower. What they learned was something else. Entirely. How to be fully present in each moment of time. In this video, I want to tell you a small story. The story of Max, 20-3 years old. A young man doing everything the modern world says he should. Disciplined, ambitious, organized, and yet constantly exhausted. And what happened when Max accidentally came across a few ancient Japanese philosophies, ideas that almost no one teaches in school? Welcome to Life Philosophy. If you enjoy quiet reflections about life, you can subscribe to the channel. And now, let's begin the story. Chapter 1: The Trap of Busyness. Max was 23 years old. He believed that if you wanted to succeed, every day had to be tightly organized. Max usually woke up at 5:47 a.m., not because he needed to, only because he once read that successful people always wake up before 6. His mornings almost never changed. 10 minutes of meditation, 30 minutes of running, breakfast already prepared at exactly 7 o'clock. He sat down in front of his computer. The workday began. Max studied digital marketing. He wanted to build his own business, so everything was planned. There were short-term goals. There were long-term goals. Spreadsheets, online courses, podcasts. He used the Pomodoro method, 25 minutes of work, a short break, then back to work again. Max's schedule was divided into colored blocks. Every period of time had its own task. From the outside, Max's life looked highly organized. He had discipline. He had direction. He had a clear plan. But every evening, when the day ended, Max felt something familiar, a heaviness in his chest, the feeling that today, he still hadn't done enough. It didn't matter how many tasks he completed. There was always something left, always something he should have done better, and somewhere in Max's mind, there was always another version of himself, more efficient, more disciplined, one step further ahead, a version of himself he could never quite catch. At 23, Max was already exhausted. The frightening thing was he didn't know why. Then, on a Thursday morning in October, everything suddenly slipped off track. That day, Max had an important presentation for the previous 3 days. He had spent almost all his time preparing, every slide carefully edited, every sentence rehearsed, everything timed perfectly. But when he opened his computer that morning, Max realized something. He had saved the wrong file. The finished presentation wasn't there. 3 days of work, nights with little sleep, and far too much coffee. All gone. Max sat silently in front of the screen, not saying anything. Almost 2 minutes passed. Then he closed the laptop, stood up on, and walked out of the apartment. Max started walking without a destination, no headphones, no podcast, no AUDIOBOOK, just walking. After wandering for a few hours through streets he had never really noticed before, Max passed by a small bookstore. In the display window were a few old books with worn covers, and in the middle of them was one simple book. On its cover was a small yellow note. On it, written by hand, was a single line: "The Time of the Samurai." Chapter 2: The Secret About Time No One Teaches. That evening, Max began reading the book. The first pages were quite simple, but then he came across a sentence that made him stop. He slowed down and read it again. Modern people see time as an enemy. Samurai saw time as a teacher. Max read the sentence several more times, because he realized that was exactly how he had been living. Every day of Max's life felt like a battle against the clock, trying to move faster, trying to do more, trying to stay one step ahead of time. If he had a few extra minutes, he looked for a way to use them. If there was an empty space in his schedule, he filled it immediately. Every day felt like a competition, and the goal was to beat time. But there was something Max had never considered. Every battle has a price, and the ones who fight the war are always the first to become exhausted. The book then introduced a concept Max had never heard before. A very short word. Ma, the author, explained that this word is almost impossible to translate fully into English. Many people try to explain it using familiar terms: space, pause, silence. But those translations still fail to capture its true meaning. Ma is not simply the absence of activity. Ma is the space in between. The space between two actions. The space between two sounds. The space between two moments. An empty space that is not empty at all. In Japanese culture, Ma appears everywhere. In music, it is the silence between the notes. Without that silence, a melody becomes nothing but noise. In traditional Japanese architecture, houses often contain large open spaces, not to fill them, but to allow the house to breathe. In martial arts, an effective strike does not begin with movement. It begins with Ma, the pause before the action, the moment of observation, the moment when you recognize what is about to happen. And then Max read a line that made him close the book for a few seconds. A schedule without Ma is not productivity. It is a form of violence people inflict on themselves. Ma can be understood in many ways, but the simplest way to think about it is this: Ma is the silence between musical notes. If a piece of music were nothing but continuous sound, without any pauses, it would no longer be music. It would only be noise. Ma also appears in Japanese architecture. Traditional Houses do not try to fill every empty space. Some spaces are intentionally left open. Those empty spaces give the house room to breathe. Same principle exists in martial arts. An effective strike does not begin with movement. It begins with a moment of waiting, a moment of stillness, a moment of observation. That is, the space between two actions, the space between two decisions, the space between two breaths. In Japanese culture, people understand that everything needs ma. Music needs ma. Architecture needs ma. Swordsmanship needs ma. A warrior who does not understand ma will always react to late because he cannot recognize what is happening in the space between. Max began looking back at his own schedule. For the first time, he looked at it like an outsider. On the page there were only blocks of color, work after work, task after task. There was no real empty space. Even rest had a purpose. Rest to recover, rest to return to work more efficiently. Max realized something. He had never truly stopped, even when he was doing nothing. His mind was already preparing for the next thing. There was a sentence in the book that made Max pause for a long time. A schedule without ma is not productivity. It is a form of violence that people inflict upon themselves. Max put the book down, then he opened his planner again, but this time he didn't try to fill the empty spaces. He did the opposite. Max began to protect them. Chapter 4, the second lesson. Ichigo Ichie. A few weeks after he began reading the book, Max was sitting in a small cafe near his apartment. On the table was a cup of hot coffee. The book lay open in front of him. Max had been reading for quite a while. Then he suddenly noticed something small. The coffee was almost gone, but he didn't remember how it tasted. Max tried to recall. Was the coffee bitter? Was it fragrant? Was it still hot? He wasn't sure, because during all that time, he had never truly tasted it. He had been drinking while reading, reading while thinking, thinking while planning tomorrow. Max's body was in the cafe, but his mind was somewhere else. In the book, Max came across another concept, a concept well known in the Japanese tea ceremony. Ichigo Ichie. This phrase is often understood in a simple way. Every moment in life happens only once. Many people think it is just a beautiful saying, something meant to inspire. But in Japanese philosophy, it is not a slogan. It is a reality. No meeting is ever exactly repeated. Two people may meet many times, but each meeting is a different moment. A morning today will never be the same as tomorrow morning. A conversation can never be lived again in exactly the same way. In the Japanese tea ceremony, every tea gathering is prepared as if it were the only one in a lifetime. Not the last, not the best, but the only one, because, in a certain sense, it truly is. Max closed the book. He sat quietly for a moment and realized something simple. For many years, he had almost always lived in the future, always thinking about the next task, always preparing for the next step, always trying to move a little faster, while life itself only happens in one place, right now. Chapter 5, the third lesson. Harahachi Buu. When Max began changing the rhythm of his life, a strange feeling appeared. It wasn't relief. It was guilt. Every time Max paused for a moment, a familiar voice appeared in his head. You're wasting time. While you're resting, other people are working. While you slow down, others are moving ahead. Max recognized that voice. He had heard it for a long time. In books, in videos, on social media. It was the voice of hustle culture. A culture that believes a person's value is measured by how busy they are. Rest is seen as laziness. Empty space is seen as wasted time. And working until exhaustion is treated as a sign of dedication. While thinking about this, Max read the next principle in the book. Harahachi Buu. This is a well-known principle in Okinawa, an island in Japan where many people live past 100 years old. The principle is very simple. When eating, stop when you feel about 80% full. Not when you are completely full. Not when you cannot eat another bite. Just around 80%. The reason is simple. The human body needs time to recognize that it has had enough. If you eat until you feel completely full, you have often already eaten too much. But what caught Max's attention was not just the eating habit. Right below that explanation, the book added something else. This principle can apply to many other things: work, training, focus. The idea is very clear. Don't use all of your energy in a single day. Always keep a portion in reserve. About 20%. That remaining portion is what allows you to return the next day with clarity and strength. Over time, modern science has begun confirming similar ideas. Studies about the brain show that breaks help the mind process and organize information. Giving full attention to one task helps people perform complex work more effectively. On the other hand, working continuously until exhaustion often leads to a familiar state: burnout, mental and physical depletion. Max read those words and slowly understood something. Exhaustion is not proof of dedication. It is often simply a sign that we have pushed beyond our limits. Chapter 7: Max's Change. What Max learned did not transform his life. Overnight, there was no big decision, no dramatic reinvention, only a few very small changes. Max began leaving empty spaces in his schedule, not to optimize them, not to prepare for the next task, simply to let those spaces exist. Sometimes Max used that time to go for a walk, sometimes he simply sat. Still no goal, no plan. Max also began paying attention to very simple things. A quiet morning in a cafe. Conversation. A silent moment, instead of drinking coffee while thinking about something else. He began to truly taste it, one sip at a time. Max also changed another habit. Every week, his mother usually called him. Before, Max would answer the phone while still working on his computer. Part of his attention on the conversation, the rest on the screen now. He did something different when his mother called. Max stopped everything. He listened fully, and during one of those calls, his mother told a small story from when Max was a child. Story he had never heard before. Max laughed for a long time. He realized how many little moments like that he had missed simply because his mind was always somewhere else in his work. Max changed something too. He no longer worked until exhaustion. When his energy reached about 80%, Max stopped. The next day he returned with a clearer mind. Work moved faster and with far less stress. Max also began observing the rhythm of his energy. Sometimes his mind felt bright and sharp. Those were the moments he focused on important work. At other times, everything slowed down instead of forcing himself. Max used those moments for simpler tasks. Gradually, Max realized something very clearly. His problem had never been a lack of time. The problem was that he was rarely, truly present in the time he already had. Let's pause for a moment and reflect on what we've explored. There are 5 very simple principles, yet each one opens a different way of looking at time. Ma, the silence between actions. A space not meant to be filled, but meant to give life room to breathe. Ichigo Ichie. A moment that happens only once. Every meeting, every morning, every conversation. None of them can ever be repeated in exactly the same way. Harahachi Buu, the 80% principle. Do not use all of your energy every day. Always keep a portion in reserve, so that tomorrow there is still something left to continue. Shizen. Following what is natural. Working with your own rhythm instead of fighting against it. Mono no aware. Recognizing the beauty of impermanence. Understanding that every moment passes, and because of that, every moment has value. When Max looked back at all of this, he realized something very simple. The problem had never been a lack of time. Time has always been there. What has been missing is our presence within it. We often try to possess time, to control it, to use every minute efficiently. But perhaps time is not something to possess. Time is something to live with. You cannot hold time still, but you can live inside it. Before this video ends, ask yourself a small question. Today, how many moments were you truly present in? Not just there with your body, but there with your full attention. If the answer is very few, that may not be a problem. Perhaps it is simply the beginning. If the ideas in this video made you pause and reflect for a moment, you can subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Each week, we will continue conversations like this. Simple reflections on slowing down a little and seeing life more deeply. And if you'd like, share in the comments, among the 5 principles today, which one made you think the most?